This is a presentation by Dr. Jon Kolkin. The title of this presentation is Inner Harmony Strategies for Living a Balanced Life. What I'll be talking about today is primarily based on my own personal experience over a number of years as both a physician and international medical volunteer, professional fine art photographer, a trained health coach, having been married for quite a number of years and having a family, also being a musician, a competitive athlete, and just basically trying to live life. So the first question one might have is, and this is probably the key question for all of us, is how can I live a happier, more fulfilling, and less stressful life? Well, I've had the good fortune over a number of years to travel to many countries, and the countries have been of all types of socioeconomic backgrounds. And one of the things that I've learned during that time, particularly because I've traveled to underserved countries around the world doing medical work, is that, in fact, other than having adequate food, shelter, warmth, safety, and community, there's really no relationship between financial wealth and happiness. A significant number of my trips have been to underserved countries throughout Asia, and that's really had a profound influence on both my perception of that and also my exposure to Buddhist countries. So, first question one might ask is, how do we even define the word happiness? Well, some people might think of actually the word pleasure when connecting the concept of happiness to how they're feeling. But I would really define pleasure as short bursts of positive emotions that are achieved through experiences that are related to material things, activities, or events. However, true happiness is something entirely different, and maybe the word happiness isn't the appropriate one to use. Maybe we should call it a sense of fulfillment, balance, well-being, inner peace. This is really an internal experience, and this is what I like to refer to as inner harmony. So what I'll be talking about today primarily is this concept of inner harmony and how we achieve it. So what are some of the characteristics of inner harmony? Well, I've, as I said, had the opportunity to be living for extended periods of time throughout Asia. So what I'd like to present is really more of a Buddhist perspective on inner harmony. Inner harmony from a Buddhist perspective is really a sense of a balance, peace, and security, seeing things with reality, seeing reality with clarity, objectively, and with your feelings, with your emotions. Inner harmony also includes acting with purpose, intention, and compassion. In order to achieve inner harmony, one really needs to have the absence of ego, greed, and envy, selfishness and anger, and be in synchrony with the laws of nature. In other words, what's intrinsic to us as human beings. The exhibition that is now at the St. Louis University Museum of Art actually is focused on these concepts of where do we find inner harmony. And basically, each of the rooms of the exhibition, of the different 5 rooms, are focused on different components that make up this concept of inner harmony. One component of achieving inner harmony is through acts of compassion and kindness, not only toward others, but also to ourselves. And then through gratitude for non-material things in our lives. Also, it's necessary to have an open mind, an open heart, and pursue wisdom in order to achieve inner harmony. Also, the healing of the mind, body, and soul are important in this quest. So one might ask, well, why is inner harmony even important? Well, what I would like to say is that from my perspective, inner harmony is important because in order to have less stress and a better health, we have to have inner harmony. To be more successful at living a fulfilling and productive life, we need inner harmony. And also to have a greater impact and be effective in helping others over a long period of time requires a sense of balance within ourselves. And if we have inner harmony, we'll also be more effective ambassadors of peace. So living a balanced life is really crucial to achieving this sense of inner harmony, and that's what I would like to focus on more now. So why is balance so important? Well, if this is your reality, then more power to you. If you're able to keep everything in balance and feel fulfilled, that's great. But in reality, for most of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, or if we'll listen to what other people are saying, or what our body is telling us, oftentimes we'll find that this is truly what our reality looks like. What happens when we are stressed, when we're rushed, when we're distracted? Well, we're more likely to have errors in perception and in action, whether that might be in our personal relationships within family members or with our friends, errors in actions in our profession, where we think we know all the answers when in fact we don't, and also errors in rebellion of our body against our mind. Our mind may be saying, oh, I can do this, but in fact our body starts rebelling. Well, so what might be some of the triggers or wake-up calls? It could be failure in school or in our profession, having a volatile temper out of proportion to the situation, drug and alcohol problems, an unexpected breakup, a major illness in ourselves or someone we love, psychological breakdown, death of someone important to us, a divorce. We become unmotivated, bored, drained, loss of creativity, and life just seems empty, meaningless. So how is this possible? How did things get so out of balance? Well, first we have to understand the intrinsic laws of nature. What makes us tick? What makes us who we are? What I would say is that in the beginning, we aren't strongly impacted by other people's influences, by society, by a lot of additional stress. We're just who we are as young children. And as young individuals, and as we go through elementary school, middle school, high school, we have a variety of things that are intrinsic to our nature that are just things that we're drawn toward, whether it be classical music, social issues, politics, all kinds of things can lead to want us to be drawn toward a certain area or another. But then what happens? Well, over time, we've all been in this situation. People will ask you, what do you do? And after a while, we become synonymous with our jobs, and we start thinking of ourselves in reference to who we are as it relates to our job. And this gets us down a path that is out of balance. So we need to focus first on what pieces are part of what makes us whole. And certainly family, school, profession take up a bigger part of our time frequently throughout our lives, and we recognize that. But we should look back and think back and understand and recognize that there are multiple things that make us whole. Our mental well-being, our spirituality, outside interest, humanitarian concerns, our physical well-being, on and on. So we can't let our profession overtake us and overshadow all the other things that make us whole. Because if we do that, then we we don't maybe recognize it, but we're missing parts of what makes us whole, and we have this sense of being unsettled, uneasy, stressed, frustrated, unfulfilled, and out of balance. So how do we break this cycle? Well, first we have to understand what true wisdom is. If we look back through our younger years, frequently the people that are good at doing multiple choice tests, they're the masters of facts, and they're considered the intelligent ones in the crowd. Then as one moves on further through school or into professions, the problem solver is the one who is most respected. But what I would like to bring out is that there is a much higher level of knowledge or intelligence that we need to focus on, and that's the big picture. That's wisdom. Because as you may have recognized amongst your colleagues and other people you've run across, sometimes the people that are the highest up on the job ladder are the most unhappy and dysfunctional people. That doesn't mean that being successful in business necessarily results in some being out of balance, but this often happens. So we need to be looking past that in order to find true balance in our lives. So if you think maybe in your own personal life that things have gotten somewhat out of balance, let's think of creative ways of rethinking our situation and figuring out how we can move forward in a more productive way and with a greater level of well-being. So I'd like to ask you first to look at the slide on the left, look at the image, you see the bar in the middle, and then the background. Think to yourself, how many shades of gray are in that center bar? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the background and make the background all the same color. And what you'll see here is that that center bar is all the exact same shade of gray, but our mind has become so accustomed to looking at things in our world, in our three-dimensional world, that we automatically make assumptions about what we're seeing and what is reality. So we need to start challenging ourselves by opening up the mind to creative ways of thinking in order to problem solve why are things getting out of balance and what are the things I can do to bring things back more into balance. Well, how do we do this? Well, first, it's important to carve out the time to really reflect. So first question to ask oneself is, how and when and where do I think most effectively? For me personally, it's a matter of late morning, I think more clearly, in a location that is quiet without distractions. And so if you're going to do this, and if you're going to do some reflecting, maybe carve out some time, put it on your calendar like you do everything else, turn off your cell phone, go to an environment that works well, and make this sacred time. Another suggestion is to maybe go back and do this again, first for a 15 or 30-minute carve out, then set on your calendar, maybe I'm going to do this again and reflect again in another 2 weeks or 1 month, whatever it might be. Journaling sometimes is very helpful for people, and also getting some feedback from trusted friends. So it's easy to talk about all these things, and we're sitting here quietly and we're listening and trying to absorb this, but I would challenge you to keep in mind this saying by the prophet Hillel the Elder: if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? All these things are crucial. These are all crucial steps in moving forward in a productive way. So if you don't take action, if you don't think that you're valuable enough to spend time reflecting on what's of value to yourself, then you're never going to make any progress. So here's a concept that's very important and one that I would like you to consider. Living each day with intention. This is crucial in order to make progress in what we're talking about of living a balanced life. So what is intention? It's a noun, an act of or instance of determining mentally upon some action or result, the end or object intended or purpose. So if you want to take some action, then first you have to understand what is going to be the driving force behind my actions and how am I going to live with intention. Well, I would challenge you to first consider your core values. What are your core values? Here, as an example, might be some core values of an individual. So what are your 3 core values? What is it that drives you in the grander scheme of things in your life? And if you haven't thought about that, maybe you can carve out some time to think about that. Next, once you have core values, then it's important in the broad sense to say, based on my core values, what will be my first long-term or my big goals, and then what will be some of my short-term goals. So what are your main goals in life? What have you carved out for yourself, let's say, over the next 3 to 5 years? Your values, whatever your values are, should help you in determining what your big goals are, and then also maybe what your short-term goals are over the next month, let's say. Then, if you know what your true goals are, then it's much, much easier to prioritize throughout your day. That's one thing that helps me stay efficient and focused and living with intention, because it's so much easier and it takes so much stress away when I know when to say yes or no to things that may come my way during the day. And every morning I typically think, what are my 3 main goals for today? Those are going to be the things that I prioritize. So when you wake up each morning, what are your main goals? Then it's important to stay focused, to stay centered, and I'll talk more about that as we go on in this presentation. Also, it's important to be honest with yourself and monitor your progress as you're going on from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, and be honest with yourself enough to make adjustments. So now I'd like to jump into talking about some of the potential benefits of non-professional interests. Okay? Non-professional interests can nurture your nature, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. It can be a source of decompression and relief of stress. It can be also extremely beneficial, and I really want to emphasize this, on honing positive transferable skill sets that can be very useful for you in your profession, in dealing with family members, etc., etc. It can help with focus, broaden one's perspective without being a rigid thinker, help with task completion, living with intention, and very importantly, with creative thinking and problem solving. There's this fallacy that we have left brain, right brain, that one's more for creative thinking, one's more for logical thinking, when in reality, more recent studies have shown that there's significant crossover between those and that they really work together. And people may not have nurtured as much of their logical thinking brain, and it may not come as naturally to them, but that doesn't mean that they can't hone those skills with the proper mindset in order to become more effective in areas that they're not necessarily as strong in. So other benefits of nurturing these non-professional interests can be contributions to society, connecting with people, leading by example, and honing self-esteem and improving self-esteem. So all the excuses in the world have been made as far as why we may not hone some of these non-professional interests. It's just a hobby. It's selfish for me to spend time on it. I really have no control over my time. It's not that important to me. I'm not confident I can make changes, etc., etc., etc. So what I'd like to say to you is that, again, emphasize that these other activities are not frivolous. They're very important based on some of the things that I explained previously. So, okay, let's say you've been sitting here and listening and saying, well, okay, I really want to make a change. For many people, it's best not to sell the farm and all your possessions, jump in a car, and drive to the wilderness and live there for the rest of your life. What I found has worked best for me is to touch my toe into the water. In other words, if I think I might want to make some adjustments in the direction I'm going or in my goals, to set out a plan, maybe over a year's time, it may be over 5 years' time, whatever it is, of trying things out in this new direction I think I might go. That can involve taking some night classes. It might involve reading a book that interests me, that might pique my interest. There are all different kinds of things that might be available, that might be options for you. So should it be done gradually, or am I in a crisis mode and I need to make some quick changes, or because if I don't, I know I'm going to run into a lot of trouble quickly. So let's talk a little bit about strategy. First thing I would suggest, if you're thinking about making some changes, is it's important to trust your inner voice. That's really, really important, while at the same time keeping an open mind to external input. Remember, I was talking about ego before. Don't let your ego get in your way. If you can be humble and listen to your inner voice and also listen to external input, listening with an open heart and an open mind, then you'll have a much better chance of being successful. And remember that life is not static. Just because you did certain things one way at one time in your life doesn't mean they have to be done that way moving forward. There is this concept of impermanence, of change. What I'd like you to do, therefore, is visualize in your mind the 24 stones that in this case will represent the 24 hours in your day. Consciously or subconsciously, we all make thousands of decisions every single day. And these decisions take up and absorb our time. If we have a clear idea of what our values are and what our goals are and what our priorities are, it's going to be much easier to, even though we don't control everything that happens in our day, we can control how we will respond. We have the opportunity to make choices. We can allocate those 24 stones into piles. So what I would like you to do is just visualize with the 24 hours in your day, how in a typical day do you usually stack those stones up? How many are in the pile for sleep? How many are in the pile for work? How many are in the pile for physical exercise? How many for interaction in social ways? How many are soaked up by social media or by zoning out in front of a TV? I'm not saying that you shouldn't zone out at times in front of a TV, but the question is, how many stones do you want to allocate to that effort? Maybe at first you're going to want to take one of those stones and cut out a quarter of it and maybe move it over to an area that you allocate to yourself, that you're in a quiet room for 15 minutes, decompressing, breathing, reflecting. Another strategy that may be helpful to some of us is to use our time and energy in ways that are intrinsic to our strengths, our passion, and our nature. There's no sense wasting a lot of time and stress trying to do or be somebody that we're not. As an example, in school, if you're taking 5 courses and you're really, really bad at math, why should you spend 80% of your effort on math when there are 4 other courses that you're really good at? Maybe it's time to accept the C in that class and really, really spend your time on things that are more intrinsic to your nature and that you're passionate about. And in the long run, you'll actually do better in life and you'll learn more about the things that are of importance to you. Also, it's important to determine your own yardstick for measuring success. We all, as I said before, have our intrinsic strengths, and therefore we should measure success based on our own yardstick. Other things that are important in order to make progress in this effort toward finding inner harmony and finding balance is, if you're going to make some changes, set yourself up for success, not for failure. How do we do that? Well, focus on 1 or 2 meaningful goals at a time. So if you think, as an example, that you want to spend more time exercising, rather than saying, okay, my goal is to exercise for an hour 6 days a week, maybe set a goal of 2 or 3 times a week physically getting to the gym and minimum workout of 15 minutes. Don't tackle the most challenging goals first. Do ones that are more doable. Set yourself up, build some confidence that you can succeed, and then gradually over time you can build up and challenge yourself more. Another thing I would stress for you is, if you want to live a balanced life, then you've got to get the technology under control. You've got to figure out who's in charge. You've got to figure out for you, what function do I want to use in order to communicate with other individuals? And what is the purpose? What is the value of different technological instruments that are available to me? There's nothing wrong with using some technology as a form of distraction, but is it being used as a distraction, and do I need to recognize that that's what it's being used for? For me personally, if someone wants to speak with me or communicate with me, and it's going to take using text messaging more than about a sentence, then I don't use text messaging. Also remember that when using text messaging, someone's intonation, someone's emotions are not picked up, and things can be miscommunicated quite easily. Also, collaborate with others to find common background. At work, if you're an attorney and you're constantly being bombarded with emails, and in order to make partner, you feel like you have to be available 24/7, maybe you're in the wrong firm. Maybe you need to have a conversation with the people within your firm and come to some common ground as far as how you're going to use technology and when you're going to use technology. Also, be cognizant of the quality and quantity of information you feed your brain. As an example, I don't want to be around negative people. It just sucks the energy out of me, and it's a distraction. So if I have the opportunity to get things done or be helpful to people in a constructive way while not physically being around negative people, then that's my choice, and that's what I do. Also, be cognizant of what you consider worthy news. For me personally, if I want to get some sort of information, then I go to a source where they have constructive dialogue amongst people that are actually have some expertise in the area that they're talking about, where they're not interrupting each other and shouting over each other, where there's an in-depth conversation rather than sound bites. Another thing that helps me also in order to be cognizant and being present and being in balance and being in synchrony and living with intention is to make sure I don't have a lot of distracting noise or lighting in the area where I'm trying to accomplish something. Another thing that's important is for me is to be more attuned to my surroundings. Or if I can focus more and really be present, then I will actually increase my level of awareness, my level of focus and function. So not only do I use my sense of hearing, but I try to see what's around me, hear, smell, taste, feel. These are all important elements in living with intention and living with balance and staying focused. I have spoken before about the concept of having my values straight, which then sets my goals, which then sets my priorities. This is what's extremely helpful in learning when to say no. If you can learn when to say no and feel comfortable about it, then there's much less anxiety, and I think you'll have less stress in your life. Another thing to keep in mind for me, and I think for all people, is to recognize the triad for a healthy body. It involves not oral intake, what we take into our bodies, and that's a whole separate conversation. Our physical activity, which I touched on previously, but also sleep. Sleep is a cornerstone to all these other things that I'm talking about. Whether you realize it or not, everyone needs at least 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep every night in order to function effectively. If we have a strong triad, we think with greater clarity, our judgment is improved, our creativity is improved, our mood, staying focused, energy, motivation, improved relationships, and we have a greater sense of inner harmony. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of this triad. In order to stay on track, I also do a number of other things which basically check my pulse throughout the day. What I'll frequently do, and which things you might want to try, is just relax the facial muscles. The jaw may tend to clench up. Relax your jaw. And that takes about 2 or 3 seconds to do intermittently throughout the day. Slowing down one's breathing and visualizing the air going in and out of your lungs can be another way to calm down and refocus. Wear a reminder, a special jewelry that you like, or a special color that reminds you to stay present, living with intention, living with focus, keeping things in balance. A mantra that you say. It could even be, the mantra could be your password that you use to get onto your cell phone or onto your computer. Another thing that I've found that can be helpful for me when going from room to room seeing patients is each time I put my hand on the doorknob, I stop for 2 or 3 seconds, take a breath, remember why I'm there, and then open the door and move into the room to be with the patient. Another thing that can be helpful with some people is journaling. Write down 3 positive things that you accomplish throughout your day. One other thing that I do that I find is very helpful, and this has been through my medical volunteer work around the world, is to find synergies. These are strategies that help in not in keeping my values all in synchrony with each other. Now, this is not what I would call multitasking. So as an example, with my overseas medical work, I'll frequently take one family member with me. This will be an opportunity to bond more closely with a family member, such as in the lower right-hand corner with my daughter Lara, who went with me to Vietnam, who can't stand the sight of blood, so she stayed away from the operating room, but she's a superb dancer, so she taught dance to deaf children in an orphanage. I also combine my exercise in those experiences, so I'll be when I'm in Bhutan, I'll be trekking in the Himalayas. Also, interaction culturally and spiritually, making friends around the world, doing my artwork, and also helping others through medical work. So one other thing I touched on previously was that doing some of these outside the profession activities can be very beneficial to be more effective in one's profession and in interactions with other people outside of one's profession. So what I found here is a good example. As a physician, one first has a piggy bank of knowledge. These are the tools of the trade, things that we use in our memory bank that help us when helping patients. So with those tools, after studying, we have those tools, and then when I'm interacting with a patient, the first thing to do is assess the situation. That involves interaction with the patient, sensing the environment that I'm in, whether the patient seems hostile or very relaxed, their family members, how they interact, assessing the situation, and then bringing in laboratory information, getting a good history, doing a good physical. That's all the assessment. And then planning and articulating options with the patient and family of ways of moving forward, then execution of the plan, and then follow through to completion. So this is the same process that I use as an artist. I have my bag of tools. I've collected information based on my previous experience. When I'm in an environment where I want to capture a mood or a situation, then that's my assessment, and then I plan how I'm going to capture that, the execution, and then the follow through with an art exhibition or whatever it might be. So this process that I'm talking about takes practice. It doesn't just happen. So one has to repetitively practice this this process in order to be successful. So one strategy that you might consider using in this process involves retraining the brain. So the brain has 70 to 90 billion neurons, and there are these axons, which you see over here to the right, and they're connected to each other I'm sorry, the neurons are all connected by these axons. They're the connectors, and then myelin is a material that is wrapped around the axons, and they help increase the speed in which something happening in one cluster of neurons transmits to another cluster. So these clusters, as an example, might go and support the concept of compassion or humility or anger or whatever other concept one might think about. So what we have learned through research is that there's neuroplasticity in our brains, even in those who are somewhat older, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. So what we've found we've been able to do is through meditative processes, which I'll explain in a minute, we're able to enhance the connections between one cluster of neurons and another, while also atrophying the amount of myelin that's around axons going from one cluster to another. So we can actually enhance pathways and suppress pathways through meditative processes. And it has been shown repeatedly that through meditation, we can, as an example, improve compassion, our attention, our focus, happiness, mental acuity, and mood. So if that's the case, then why not do that? Why not improve our mental attitude, our mental well-being? This is Jimmy Buffett, who my wife is a big fan of, and he has a well-known song that says, "Everywhere you go, you always bring the weather with you." So indeed, I've found that is the case. I can have one patient that is a very positive thinker, and if I help them with making a diagnosis and options, they can be extremely happy that we've found a potential way of approaching the situation, whereas another patient with the exact same diagnosis can be all distraught, thinking of, oh my goodness, all the negative things that they're going to have surgery, et cetera, all with the identical diagnosis. So our mental attitude is very important. As I mentioned before, repetition is very, very important to a process of meditation that will change our mental outlook and help us achieve greater inner harmony and greater balance. There are a variety of different forms of meditation. They basically, most of them involve breathing techniques, relaxation of the body, posturing, and mental imagery. That's a whole separate talk, and we could go through that at another time if requested. But one thing that's important to know is that even meditating 20 minutes per day, 20 minutes in a day, per day, or even just 2 or 3 times a week, if done over 3 weeks, can impact the myelin around our axons and help us with this process of focusing and changing our mental outlook. Even meditating in 5-minute increments can be helpful to some people. I find that for me personally, doing aerobic exercise in a rhythmic way of meditating is helpful. So for me, my meditative practice is typically swimming laps, or on an elliptical exercise, say elliptical exerciser. There are also eating meditation exercises where one simply focuses for a minute or so before starting a meal, focuses on the food in front of them, visualizing where it came from, how it grew from a seed, the water coming down from above, the food growing, what its texture might be, how it might taste in the mouth, and then its color, and then eating the food. Walking meditation is another one that can be helpful for people. So there are lots of ways of training yourself to focus, to living with intention, to achieving greater harmony. The key again is understanding first, what are your values? What are your goals? What are your priorities? Understanding that things outside of your profession can have a profoundly positive impact on you, on those around you, can help in a positive way with your profession, can make you more effective over a longer period of time, and can let you and help you lead a more fulfilling life. I thank you for your time and for your attention, If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email address is kolkinphotography@gmail.com. You can also reach me through my website at kolkinphotography.com. Thank you.